Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Warm welcome to Trend Talk series of Summer Sourcing Weeks Go Online. Lifestyle and Interiors Trends Spring and Summer 2021 presented by WGSN. This session will be conducted in English and simultaneous interpretation in 普通话 will be provided on the Zoom platform. 本次研讨会将以英语进行。在 Zoom 平台收看的观众可以启动 Zoom 言语翻译功能，设置收听普通话频道。Without further ado, let's welcome Charlie Clark, our trend specialist from WGSN Mindset. Charlie, please.
Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Charlie and I'm one of the trend specialists at WGSN. I hope you're all doing well and keeping safe wherever you are. For those of you who don't know, WGSN is the world's leading trend forecaster in everything from consumer trends to product trends. And we're very, very happy to be working in partnership with HKTDC again. I'm sorry that we can't all be there in person together, but hopefully next time we will be. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the creative direction for Spring Summer 21. So these are trends that have been curated and developed specifically for HKTDC. And what we're going to do is look at each trend in detail, including the background, the mood, the color, and then some key directions for both design and displays. So before we get into each trend, though, it is important to understand some of the macro context. So we need to look at the overarching theme that is impacting the home and interiors world and that are really driving our trends forward for the season. For Spring Summer 21, this is from function to meaning. So the home and interior space has always adapted with the change of society or with the advancement of different industries. And in previous years and more recent years, we've seen the home change to cater for multiple needs and uses. So we've really seen a rise in flexible spaces, in open plan living, or kind of zoned living. What's continuing to drive innovation forward now is the idea that homes must have meaning. So they really need to reflect the people that live in it and the values that they have. Designing for lifestyle priorities like sustainability, like meditation, stimulation, and longevity is continuing to provide the most meaning to consumers. So we really need to take into consideration how aesthetics can become more meaningful, particularly around these issues. So the 4 trends that come through for Spring Summer 21 each cover one or several of these 4 elements. So looking at sustainability, meditation, longevity, and stimulation in particular. And we're doing these through these 4 trends that you see now. So cosmic escape, nature, and slow revival. And the last one is sensory indulgence. So we're going to start with cosmic escape. And cosmic escape is all about looking at the fact that we are now living in this world where our environment is under some threat. And Cosmic Escape looks at forward-thinking designs and materials with a sense of mysticism as a way of appealing to consumers who are seeking a lot more order or looking for deeper meaning. So space continually provides a lot of innovation and intrigue. Commercial space travel is on the horizon now. Space always drives a lot of speculative thinking, innovation, design elements. And this is running alongside the fact that more and more consumers are searching for answers outside themselves. So we're seeing a rise in spiritual pursuits or mysticism, and it's about looking beyond the earth for escape. We see this reflected in a number of ways. So to reference air and space travel. For example, like you see on the screen now, Luke Jerram's touring installation, which was light and audio based, was called the Museum of the Moon. And it happened last year, and it featured projections of very detailed imagery of the lunar surface. So it really brought the moon down to Earth. And what we're going to see is that design will increasingly provide a little bit of kind of balance or tension between more apocalyptic inspired designs that we're seeing and ethereal aesthetics. So tapping into that ongoing fascination for all things kind of mystical. In this trend, you'll see a lot of references to arcane symbols, to cosmic elements, and this will help to balance out the kind of harsh lines or raw elements that we see. But overarching, this trend is really about easing consumer anxiety with products that can offer a sense of cosmic reassurance. And you'll see within the first trend element, so we're looking at the mood here. Cosmic escape is translated through a lot of overly faceted surfaces that appear carved and geometric. It all kind of creates this moonscape type feel. Because of that, it's both kind of powerful and impactful and heavy, but light and tranquil and soothing at the same time. Lighting will be really key within this trend to convey that otherworldly glow. So we see a lot of kind of light spectrums being brought into spaces and surfaces. We'll see a lot of use of singular materials here to convey that sense of solidity and purity, and kind of talk to that play on balance that we just mentioned. But even the shapes that we see within this story, they'll feel futuristic or reminiscent of space travel. So you can see the bench here by Constantin Grillert is almost spaceship-like in shape. When we're looking at colors, the colors here have an unnaturally saturated quality to them. So we're seeing a lot of deeper tones playing with these kind of silvered grays that bring a timeless moon surface appeal, and offer a lot of contrast to the brighter hues that are in this palette. At the top, you can see there are some kind of clinical blues that almost feel more artificial than they do natural. And they're a nice evolution for some of the teal tones that we've been seeing more recently. Black is quite important within this color palette. It's becoming much more important across all market levels. And it's key here to give you that space-like contrast between light and dark and that sense of depth that we need to kind of convey that space feel. I do want to call out the yellow in this palette as well, because this kind of really soft pale yellow brings in that otherworldly glow, that sense of light that's needed. But what's important with this color palette is not just to consider them as single color applications. Think about more dynamic surfaces that can play with light and movement, and we'll talk about these as I go through. But it's about surfaces that can almost change color. And you can see when you look at this color palette as a whole, it does almost have a holographic feel to it. So these colors work really nicely in gradated compositions, whether that is for interior spaces, for print and pattern, or for product design. And we all see a play with finish and surface in here as well. So from high gloss to metallic finishes to kind of rough and ready and more raw brutalist finishes as well. So looking now here at some of the key design trends within this story, and starting with simplistic brutalism. This is really nice, I think, because is looking at these brutalist elements here with this raw, almost retro-futuristic and slightly nostalgic lens. So we see lots of simple lines, simple geometries, again, those kind of single sheet applications being important. But everything here feels clean and structural. And the interest really comes from that play between matte and shine, between rough and smooth. So I love the piece here by Knoll, which is that kind of unusual shaped object that feels structural yet soft. It's almost human-like as well in some ways, but it does have that really great play with matte and shine on the surface. We're also seeing space not only being an aesthetic direction here, but designers are increasingly starting to play with space within interiors, products, and structures as well. So you can see the space design by Ephria Spa in the top corner, and also the table by Kin and Company on the left-hand side. I really love this piece as it kind of embodies a lot of the elements that we've talked. It's got this balance between solidity and lightness, between dark and bright, between texture, and between that kind of smooth aesthetic. So it's a really great piece to kind of embody this story. The next direction that we're looking at is industrial and crumpled. And I think the name here describes it very, very well. It's all about these kind of molten or crater-like surfaces that mimic the imperfection that we might find on the moon's surface. So you can see how this translates across different product categories, from furniture to decorative accessories. Again, the use of surface and use of the qualities, the matte and shine, the light used, really do help give this piece, these pieces in this direction, rough yet refined finish. Next up, we have diffused radiance, so a little bit brighter here, and I really love this because it is about ethereal lightness and the transience of color. So you can see here the use of color changing treatments on hard surfaces or clear surfaces, again, playing with that sense of balance. And this is a really nice evolution on a lot of the dichroic color applications that we've seen being quite popular. We're seeing here the use of more matte colors and less shine within it. So more of these kind of frosted effects, which feel slightly more elevated and more luxurious. So the color application itself gives the color changing effect. We love the fabric that you see by Menth in the corner. So they've used kind of waft and wept and offset it to create transitions in color, which is really, really subtle, yet really, really effective. Also in the top right, so this is an interesting one because this is actually, it looks like it's a kind of photo effect, but it's actually a design by Calico Wallpaper. So it's from their Prism collection, and it replicates the refraction of light, which I think is a really nice way to think about how you could translate these types of stories into prints and patterns really effectively as well. And moving on, looking at lunar textures here. So this is very much about the moon's surface and how you can replicate that in product. Surfaces here feel slightly brittle. They feel hard but delicate, so as if they could kind of break away or crumble or erode over time. And what's interesting here is that this can be executed in so many different ways. So you can see quite literal interpretations of the moon's surface here, or of the moon itself. The Catalani and Smith candle holder, for example, is obviously a quite true to form moon-like structure with that backlit glow that will give the moon's essence. But this studio furthermore stool in the center, it actually is looking at the texture of the moon slightly more and replicating that. So it's actually made from a ceramic foam. So ceramics are injected into foam, and the foam is then kind of burnt off to leave the structure and the lightness. So it's actually really interesting. This stool is very light to the touch, despite looking very weighted and heavy. So similar to that idea of the gravity. Also the mutaforma piece, which you see in the bottom corner, it's created by bringing lots of different fragmented materials together to give that sense of texture and imperfection. So there are lots and lots of different ways that we can look at working this idea of lunar texture into product. The next couple of pages look at how these elements can come together as stories, as VM inspiration, or for displays. So a little bit more on the application or the curation. And curated elements here is very much about using these separate, quite modular pieces together in a way that feels cohesive. So the combination of raw and natural feeling materials in spaces that play with contrast of light and dark bring together this otherworldly sense of glowing effects. It's also important to think about these totemic structures that we see and these kind of totemic stacked up applications. Also vertical hangings, I should say, will be key here. So because we are looking to outer space, looking up is the an obvious direction here. So think about ways that you can play with space vertically as well. And lastly, for this trend, we're looking at odd matter. So really about glowing effects here, about molten surfaces, about very, very kind of textural finishes and unusual finishes. So the shapes here kind of play with perspective. A lot of what you're seeing on the screen right now is hard surfaces that look soft. So the shape combined with the material really is really important here to convey that idea of oddness. A really nice example of this, or actually a nice example of this or that sums up many parts of this cosmic escape trend is the building in the center by Mario Tai. So where you can see the structure of the building through the outside, but you also can't fully see inside. You can see the hardness and the heaviness, but also feels kind of light and somewhat mysterious and ethereal. Really brings and combines a lot of those elements that we've talked about within Cosmic Escape. And we think it is a really, really great example of design playing with these slightly unusual elements. Okay, so the next trend that we have is constructed nature. And constructed nature is science and nature coming together. So we're looking at slightly strange or irregular shapes or liquid look surfaces and mathematical patterns. So this direction is really about empowering nature through technology to help us achieve new developments and new possibilities within the world of material and product design. So it's very much driven by new attitudes towards sustainability, whether that's developments that we have or an intrigue that we have in fermentation processes or vertical farming designs. It's all about our interest in the scientific processes that go into nature and how we can enhance these. So designers can explore how light and color temperature can affect mood, can affect plant life. The lamps that you see in the center here are all kind of showing how light can affect photosynthesis or kind of how it can affect the ripeness of products. But what's really important within this trend is bringing the physicality of nature back into objects. So really showing nature within the products themselves, within the surfaces, and creating a sense of visual intrigue that makes surfaces look alive, or that can textures that can mimic organic forms. So the relationship between kind of construction, the world of construction, or the elements of construction, and green design continues to be important in creating a lot of new aesthetics that we're seeing come through. So it's kind of like applying mathematic precision to organic materials and forms. And I think what's really important to keep in mind within this trend is that it is about tech enabling nature. So nature still very much is the focus. So the finish isn't anything too techy. It's precise, yet it's still organic. And the colors within this story really highlight the idea of enhanced nature. So these hyper-saturated yet natural blues and greens feel bio-bright. So they align perfectly with the concept of science meets nature. It's a very refreshing new take on more natural color stories that we've seen. It kind of feels a little bit urban inspired or industrial design inspired. But the blues and greens really carry the story forward. The metallic blue at the bottom that you see here is key to bringing in slightly more of that science feel, that kind of techie element. And you'll see when we go through the concepts themselves, there is a strong influence of water within this. So a lot of these kind of digital aquas will become key. The ashy neutrals will be really key here, again, to give that a slightly more industrial feel, but just to help balance out the more saturated tones within the palette. And the yellow, so similar to the previous color palette, we're seeing yellow being important to give that sense of light and perspective within playing with light and surface finish. So moving on now to into the design trends themselves, and starting here with transforming textures. So here we're looking at echoing the textures and patterns that you would find in the sea or on land, and combining fluid lines, opaque and luminous details, these kind of chalky or rock inspired textures all together. So the piece that you see in the top right-hand corner, which is this incredible frozen wave by Kaya Upli, who I've probably pronounced terribly, is a great source of inspiration here for this trend, because it looks at transforming water textures into solid forms. So again, really taking inspiration from nature, but using kind of technical applications. We can also think about in this trend ways that we can enhance natural pigmentation patterns by experimenting with marbled effects or blurring pigments into one another. Even in some cases, we can look at kind of splicing or blocking materials to add depth and interest. I personally love the Delft University pieces that you see at the bottom. So these inherently marbled materials are a beautiful example of kind of tech meeting nature, because the color is intrinsic to the object, so it feels like it could be naturally occurring. And it means that the focus is on the materiality of the object, so the weightiness of the object, the material itself. And next up, we have rough and raw. So this is about embracing the raw appeal of natural materials and finishes with earthy mineral surfaces and patterns that give designs an organic quality. So raw sophistication will remain a really key trend for hard goods, giving designs this kind of imperfect and bespoke appeal. So again, all of the things that we'd find in nature. We can take a lot of inspiration here from natural occurring textures, geological textures, from mineral formations, from rocks, and celebrate them with raw edges or contrast them with kind of partially polished surfaces. So the piece that you see in the bottom left-hand corner by Rudolf Schellin is an important one to note, just because he's cut into the material itself to allow you to see these linear streaks. And it's this kind of mathematic precision meets the natural form that really embodies this constructed nature trend. And next up, we have frozen states. So this is all about capturing movement in materials. Water is becoming a prominent design, or more prominent in designs, because consumers are increasingly considering water's role in more sustainable futures. So how we are impacting our water sources, how we can be more considerate and using water within design processes. Taking a lot of focus, and we're seeing that reflected in design come through. So here we're looking at water and liquidity in different forms, whether they're poured or melting textures, or whether they're kind of frozen or carved textures. So this obviously works really well in materials that stay most true to the element of water or can mimic it in some way. Like things like glass obviously will work really well here, acrylics, marbles. But we love the examples here that play with both form and texture within one structure. Or even the Wang and Soderstorm finish that is matte, yet still very, very fluid. So there's a lot that can go into this element, but it's really about mimicking nature, giving that sense of fluidity and movement within the products themselves. Next up, we are looking at organic lines. So again, using water-like effects or more geological forms, and these kind of pearlescent finishes to create designs that feel almost like that high-tech take on nature. So they're definitely organic feeling, they're definitely naturally inspired, but they might just have a little bit more of a tech enhancement. So it's all about mimicking organic lines, pieces that feel designed but unstructured, surfaces that are highly textured. And this is also a good inspiration, not just for product design or surfaces, but also for print and pattern. You can see in the design milk piece at the bottom how naturally occurring grains have been replicated. And this is something you could definitely do in print and pattern. And what's key here is that you kind of warped it so it has a sense of textural interest as well. It's not just a complete flat surface. Again, here looking at more applications within spaces, within interior design and visual merchandising. And here we are really looking at those water-like surfaces and those kind of translucent, dappled effects being really, really important. Surfaces that have a natural kind of ripple to them or a dappled feel, whether that is through the texture that you use or through the use of color and light. So applying different colors within the materials themselves or lighting through materials to create these kind of interchangeable surface will be really, really key. So this is a commercial take on some of the other water-like trends that we've talked about, and it works really well across categories. So the installation that you see here by Art Bloom is actually an interactive immersive experience, which is created by projecting light through flowers. So the flowers are hanging from the ceiling. And this creates a really incredible effect and combines, again, science and nature. So there's different ways that you can think about this trend and the applications, but the effect is all about this sense of motion, of movement in a very natural way. And lastly, for this trend for constructed nature, we have organic and imperfect. So this is another really great and a really great commercial way to look at this constructed nature trend, because it allows you to display different elements of nature together in really dynamic ways. So lots of organic like structures and surfaces, whether you are from the sea, like these kind of coral inspired pieces we see in the middle, or from the land. You can see how these can combine really beautifully together. I particularly love the Ennis and Akiv tile work that I think shows this really perfectly actually, because you have this kind of mathematical grid-like pattern, but each piece is unique and has this natural surface and natural design within it. So it's a really great example of this trend. And it's also a great example of how you could translate this again into print and pattern. I also, we love the idea of using frosted surfaces and backlighting, things like plants. So really simply bringing nature and technology into one space. Okay, so the third trend that we have for the season is slow revival. And this is a more minimal story. So it's probably the most minimalist trend that we have. But it's really about design which ages beautifully, that gets better with time. And it looks at how consumers are looking for products with longevity and with more meaning. So the appeal of our kind of pared down lifestyles or stripped back lifestyles has had and will continue to have a major impact on design. So the art of kind of simplifying our lives is evolving with deeper, more emotional connections. So consumers are really trying to connect more emotionally with their surroundings and with their products. So what we see for Spring Summer 21 is this really does result in designs that have a long-term focus. So materials that maybe will change over time, anything that kind of character will be imbued into, will all add to the kind of charm of the design. We'll also see utilitarian styles becoming less stiff. So basics will become much more special. So although this is about simplicity, it's also about specialness as well. And principles like the Japanese principle of wabi-sabi, which is obviously rooted in imperfection, will find newfound appreciation in consumers' lives as well. So in this direction, although minimalism is about minimalism that is full of character, full of attention to detail, it's imbued with a sense of authenticity, of craftsmanship, of history, so that everything, although it's less, it is still more. And within this story, you should really be thinking about, and you'll see as we go through, that we're thinking about much more humble, natural materials, using them in unexpected ways, and just really embracing the natural beauty of surfaces, of kind of handcrafted details. So the mood of this trend, you can see it's a sense of calming craft. And within this, we'll see lots of comforting warm tones, comforting shapes, leveraging heritage pieces, leveraging local materials, local craftsmanship, so that you can tell a story with the products of both provenance and craft. So we'll also see lots of the furniture, obviously within this, it feels very comforting, very soothing. So lots of either bulging or curved furniture, textural surfaces from walls to products give this extra sense of natural connection, but also of depth, of honesty. And these kind of curves and this plumpness that you see in design is a key way to express the calmness and the slowness of spaces and products moving forward. Because this trend has a sense of longevity to it, it's got this sense of history, of nature, of comfort, all really running hand in hand. We see these very familiar, rich, earthy tones coming through. So colors like terracotta being very, very important within this. More utilitarian tones that you see in the palette, like this kind of olive green tone, they're offset by these kind of riches. So it's a very warm, dusky feeling palette. I do want to call out the kind of gray mauve tone that you see at the very, very bottom is an important color to note here, because it's a new neutral tone, and it has this changeable quality to it. So it can sometimes appear more kind of neutral, or other times it feels slightly more like an updated pastel tone. So depending on how you work with that color, it can take on different qualities. So looking at how those kind of soft colors can be used, and how we can look at these almost kind of creamy applications of color. So although this trend is minimal, again, it's not about starkness. So it is about comfort and softness. And that sense of softness is also seen in the body of designs themselves. So looking at that Silo Studio Cup with its kind of perfectly imperfect surface, or the plumpness of the stools in the center. So these are very, very simple items, but they have that extra sense of comfort and softness, which will be really key to this story. And next, we're looking again at that idea of comfort and softness, but here we're looking at more of these comforting curves. So thinking about how both shape and material can be used to bring a sense of comfort to spaces. Here we're also looking at how you can play with materiality. So looking at how you can make hard materials appear soft and soft materials appear hard. So for example, the Mui table at the top that you see is a solid material, but it has this sense of fluidity and softness to it. Another key element within this comforting curves direction, and one that I particularly love, is this sense of relationshipistic design. So designs that almost have a human element to them. And you can see that in both the Nea Studio sofa and the Nathan Burns piece at the bottom, that have this feeling of being kind of interconnected and really soft. So they almost feel like two hands laid upon each other. And automatically that feels very comforting to us, because it does have that kind of human element. So this is a really nice way to look at it, curves evolving and changing. And next up, we have raw elements. So as the name suggests, here we are looking at raw elements and raw surfaces. So things that feel as if they've just been harvested from nature, or that feel handcrafted and or in some cases slightly unfinished. We'll also see a lot of kind of porous clay surfaces coming through, But here it's really about keeping things very true to their natural form. So this is definitely driven by shifting attitudes to sustainability, where slow design and native craft and nature all run hand in hand and are key. So this is a really great way to incorporate heritage or locality into products and spaces, really telling the story of the local environment or the local crafts within design surfaces and products. And then moving on to, again, very textural, looking at crafted textures. So it's about here looking at broken up patterns or surfaces that feel crafted yet intentional. So think about ways to use the color, to use the scale, to use the composition, to give heritage patterns or heritage surfaces a modern, artisanal, but deconstructed update. So this is a great commercial take on the trend across categories, from textiles with these kind of broken weave patterns that we see at raw edges, to surfaces, whether you're using relief patterns to add textural interest, like we see in the top right-hand corner, to simply just using print and pattern again. So think about different ways that you can update patterns and surfaces to give that crafted yet intentional feel, that's still minimalistic. So it's not too over the top here at all, whether that's by stripped back color uses, or through the kind of purposeful placements of the colors. And next we have patches and layers. I love this. Just personally, I love this. Because it looks at how we can almost recreate mineral compositions or sedimentary layers in much more crafted ways. So this idea of elemental layers being reproduced really quickly resonates with us as humans, as consumers, and it brings that sense of slowness and that perspective of time into designs really easily. So this works really nicely in wood textures. So you can see how you can use the natural grain to lead the direction. This works really well in clay, in paintwork, even in glasswork as well. So many different ways that you can think about this. But the layers here, they all need to feel somewhat random and not completely regimented. So bringing again that more natural element as opposed to being overly designed. But this is a great story. This is a great way to play with the beautiful colors, these kind of rich colors, these natural colors that we have within the palette. But great for surface applications, great for multiple different product categories, and a really nice way, again, I think, to tap into the slowness of this trend. And then next, so while I'm talking about time, here we are looking at balanced in time. So looking more about composition within spaces, we're seeing these organic structures and modular forms, bringing a sense of balance in both the objects and the materials themselves. So for example, the Fiona Lynch piece in the center that you see, it actually encompasses or embodies a lot of that sense of balance we're talking about. So it balances solidity and softness. It balances kind of the idea of space and confinement. It balances visibility and concealment. It balances hard and soft. So there's a lot of that sense of balance that's really important within this trend, within spaces. And again, you can see that in many of the pieces here, these modular components that feel slightly imperfect, but still very harmonious. Again, the use of color will be really important within this trend to get that more natural feel. And because it is a minimalist story, it is about these purist designs and clean designs meeting these earthy, warm tones that give space and pieces this kind of soft richness that will be really key. And the last part for slow revival is around mindful moments. So looking again here at how we can bring that element of time into displays and into designs. So encouraging people to take mindful moments to reflect. So this can be achieved in different ways, whether it's in composite textures or trapped materials that really invite us to look at the details, or within these bound and wrapped details like you see at Zen Rocks at the top. The way the rock is kind of wrapped and bound is handcrafted, and you can kind of get this sense of time that it would have taken to do this. So anything that imbues that sense of time. Also within spaces, using light as a way um, to invite you to reflect, or using space design as a way to give you moments of calmness, of slowness, will be really, really key here as well. So this is a perfect kind of example of how people are thinking about the products that they're buying, and how slow revival really is about taking moments of time, being considerate, thinking about craft, thinking about nature, and products that are in it for a longer period of time. Okay, so the last trend that we have is sensory indulgence. So if slow revival was the most minimal trend that we have, sensory indulgence is definitely the most maximal. So within this trend, we are looking a lot at digital aesthetics. So aesthetics that combine physical and digital elements. And this trend, yeah, it is all about sensory indulgence and play, because it's kind of driven from the fact that as we spend more time in digital spaces, which is obviously something we're doing together right now, we are finding spaces and objects to stimulate our senses and kind of empower or engage our sense of physicality and touch. So this will be increasingly important, the kind of physicality of products and elements that you want to kind of touch and engage with in the real world. So the development of digital design is bringing digital elements and transferring them into the physical world with surfaces and forms that almost seem too intense or too digital to be true. So designers are finding a lot of new power in this. They're finding a lot of power in play and stimulation, and they are looking to incorporate all our senses. So we're even seeing ASMR, so audio sensory meridian response, is a surging category. Maybe some of you have explored it already, but it's about looking at online content to stimulate a physical response. So ASMR is about audio responses, and we're even seeing these audio elements being included in design as well. So what you'll see within this trend is that we are playing with these ideas, the idea of sensation, of touch, of all of our different elements, but also we're playing with notions of play, of whimsy, of kitsch, lots of contrasting textures and colors to amplify that aesthetic. And aesthetics, they're not just taken from digital worlds. So we're kind of seeing aesthetics being borrowed and combined from many different movements, from Memphis to brutalism to craft to Art Deco. So we're all kind of creating this new visual language. So when we start to look at this for design trends or kind of for mood inspiration, you can see the idea of kind of sensory indulgence here. So you can see that it's about playfully kitsch products, about super tactile and haptic surfaces that seem to grow or unfold or change, or that just kind of entice you to want to touch them. It's very much about bold, playful, enticing aesthetics within this trend. Surface treatments are intense, color saturation is intense, and it means that we get this unreal kind of whimsical, joyful design through. And whether that's in kind of space design, whether that's in product, whether that's in graphic design as well, we get this feeling where it's this, I want to say like a weird but pleasant dream. So it's almost not, it doesn't feel real. And the colors, they definitely reflect that. So what we're calling them eclectic pastels. So we are seeing them being pastel based, but kind of amplified to a digital version. And these colors are super impactful, and they work equally well on their own or combined in kind of high intensity color harmonies. The paler pinks that you see at the top will be important within this story because they offer a softer, dustier color that will be key to kind of pare back some color harmonies, but also they give a sense of soft femininity, which kind of underscores this story in some places. So they have to balance out the brighter pops, but I do think it's important to note in here that even the most neutral tones do have a colored undertone to them. So they do have this pinkness running throughout. So they're not flat, they're really versatile. And although neutral, they're not like a plain kind of white or off-white. And when we get into the design trends here, we're looking at 3D effects first. So how can we create visual illusions by using kind of color, or how can we add depth and space through clever applications of these bold colors? This direction works particularly well for kind of walls. So it's an easy, it's a way to kind of stimulate our senses, or for us to engage physically with the space really, really quickly and really easily. Color also has such a big impact on our mood. It's a great way to kind of engage on that deeper level, that more sensorial level as well. This trend will work super well. This kind of 3D effect will work super well for prints and graphics, obviously, but it will also work for kind of modular designs or compositions. So you can see the tables from Glass Italia, where it's kind of these removable modular objects that you can quickly change the color, change the depth of color in the playfulness of the kind of composition. So this will be a kind of key element as well. And then the next trend is all about Memphis meets brutalism. So like I said, we are seeing this trend borrow from different design eras. And this is a combination of Memphis inspiration and brutalist aesthetics. So what it results in is these incredible designs that are super playful, really impactful, but very, very simple. So they're almost childlike in design, and they bring a sense of kind of party or play or energy to space very, very quickly. Color choice will be really key here. Finish will be really key here. So these kind of bold confetti-like colors, and then using them to kind of play off contrasts in texture or finish. So you can think about applying these in high shine finishes like we see in the chair, or also in solid flat, more of that kind of childlike quality. So this is great across product categories, and this will be great for kind of decorative accessories as a way to simply update spaces and bring in that sense of play and color. And next, talking a lot of this trend will be talking about color and color application. And Deco Candy is the evolution of the pastel everything trend that we've seen. So what we're seeing now are these saturated pastels, these kind of electric pastels coming through and being used together to create digital but dreamy looks. So this is actually a really nice commercial take on this sensory indulgence trend, I think, because there are lots of applications that you can consider here. It can be really cute and friendly and simple, but it still has that kind of sensorial and digital aspect to it. So something to note is, although these are simple and playful, that kind of digital aspect will be key. So whether you're looking at the Artex stools in the center, and all they've done is color up the grain within the wood in these kind of digital colors that make it feel like a digital blur or like a glitch. So really easily bringing that kind of aesthetic into physical product. But also the sense of kind of digital organization. So Lush Labs is an example that I think is really great, because all they've done is simply organize their bath bombs, I believe it is, into these grid-like formations. So it's almost like a digital grid, but it's super tactile. It's got all the elements of color, being that kind of highly saturated color within it. But yeah, it's bringing that kind of digital aesthetic and physical world together. So next up, we have plush fuzz. So as the name suggests, it is all about creating textiles with a very kind of cozy, tactile appeal, but still with that kind of unexpected, playful twist. So this isn't like the cozy, tactile feel that we might found in some of the more hygge-based trends previously, those kind of more comfort-led trends. This is more about playful textures and playful colors. So looking at using super tactile, fluffy fibers, shearling inspired materials, or really, really kind of densely packed constructions to cover everything from floors to soft furnishings. So this is a great one to really, really go for it and really kind of play with these colors in one place to be really bold. You can even think about kind of adding hand tufting or laser etching to create even more textural interest. But this is definitely quite an over the top, very Instagrammable friendly, I'll say, direction. But it's key to this trend for a couple of different reasons. So obviously there are the use of these highly impactful color applications that add instant visual interest. There's the tactile element that invites you to kind of interact with the product, to touch the product. You do want to kind of just run your hands through some of these surfaces. And then on top of that, these densely packed surfaces can actually change the acoustics of a space. So it taps into that idea of complete kind of sensory indulgence and play. So talking about that kind of idea of engagement or interaction with products, haptic and surrounding here is how we can look at using products and spaces together to encourage human interaction and encourage that sense of play. So thinking about how you can use surfaces to create surfaces and light to create this sensory environment, bringing that sense of touch to the everyday so that our surroundings become much more immersive and responsive to us. So whether that is through touch and texture, like the image in the center, the kind of putty light that you see, which obviously when you touch it or squash it, turns the bulb on and off, which I think is super cute and playful. Or as seen as by the Snarkitecture's sway installation in the bottom. So it had these kind of floating orbs that would light up in response to human touch. So obviously these are something that involve a little bit more of a tech element of kind of digital connectivity, but will be great for kind of VM inspiration. But there are more commercial applications here that you can think of as well that will definitely work, like using curved and linear shapes that allow you to play with multiple colors in one way, to encourage movement through spaces, to impact mood, using texture to kind of encourage touch or play, or even using really simple kind of clever cutouts. So the piece we see by from Ghani actually brings these kind of digital, quite kind of unusual shapes into real life, but in a very, very simple way. So it doesn't have to be super technologically driven. It doesn't need to be very, very complicated. There are ways that you can think about enhancing people's surroundings and making spaces more immersive quite simply. And the very last piece of this trend is bold and playful. So these are two words that I probably said quite a lot already, and I think you'll probably have seen a lot of these types of designs so far. But this really is about embodying the simple power of play and sparking joy. So shapes and displays, again, are quite childlike. They're almost, in some cases, bubblegum-like or quite kitschy in a lot of places. For example, the fruit objects that you see by Devon Made are actually made out of glass, but they feel almost like they are jelly-like or squishy. So again, playing with our senses, playing with perspective. Also within this trend, we are seeing some soft industrial elements being incorporated as well. So how can we use these, or how can we use color cleverly as a way of navigation to really simply update spaces, to update displays? And when we combine these elements together, these kind of soft industrial elements with these kind of more kitschy, childlike elements, it almost creates a playground-esque feel. So these kind of unusual elements can all be mixed together, and I think it really does sum up that sense of play that we find out throughout this whole sensory indulgence story. It is about making our physical spaces more indulgent to us and to our senses, so that we can connect with them in a deeper, more meaningful way. So those are our 4 trends for the season. So Cosmic Escape, which was really about looking to the moon for a sense of calm, looking for deeper meaning outside of ourselves and out with the world that we live in. Constructed nature is about where science and nature can work in harmony, and how you can use tech to enhance nature. So not taking away from nature in any way, but using it to enhance natural elements. Slow Revival then was looking at designs that will grow better with age, much more of a minimalistic story there, but minimalism with a sense of meaning, with a sense of purpose. And then the very last trend was sensory indulgence, which we just went through, which is all about embodying and indulging our senses completely, whether that's sight, touch, whether that's sound, whether that's light. How can you really encourage play within space and project design? Okay. So that's it from me today. Thank you all very, very much for joining. I really hope you found this inspiring or insightful. If you are interested in finding out more about the consumer drivers, do watch out for an email that will be on its way to you, containing our future consumer summary. But in the meantime, if you have any questions about this presentation, about these trends, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself on my email, which is charlie.clark@wgsn.com. Or if you have any questions about WGSN services, how we can help, you can always reach out to Anki Mac at her email address there. So thank you again very, very much for joining. Please take care, stay safe, and we hope to see you all again very, very soon. Thank you.
Huge thanks to our distinguished guest today, Charlie. Audiences may contact Charlie for further discussion and inquiries via email. I believe all our online audiences being with us today have gained a lot from this inspirational session. Special thanks to our audiences joining from different parts of the world. Here comes the official end of the online broadcast. Before you go, please fill in the questionnaire to let us have your feedback. 今天的研讨会圆满结束。再次感谢讲者精彩的分享。为更了解大家的想法和意见，我们诚邀大家填写研讨会的问卷。I hope you enjoyed the event, and please do support us in another session on this Friday, Hong Kong time 31st of July, 3:30 p.m. Trend Watcher, The Reshaping of Retail Landscape. Representatives from renowned trend researcher Euromonitor International and Really Design will be sharing their insights on the latest trends in retail industry. Please check out more details on our fair website and register to join us. 另一场精彩的研讨会将于香港时间本周五下午3点半举行，由国际著名的调研机构欧瑞国际以及 Really Design 代表分享零售业市场的最新趋势，大家切勿错过。Thank you very much for joining us today, and wishing you fruitful business in the Summer Sourcing Week Go Online. Thank you. 再次感谢各位今天的参与，再见。